My name is Jim Carter. I'm 83 years old, and I moved to Wakefield in August 2001. I grew up in Stoneham, graduated from Stoneham High in 1959. Uh, Attended Northeastern University, where I proceeded to flunk out at the end of my sophomore year. Worked for a year, got into Boston College, and proceeded to repeat myself, flunk out of Boston College at the end of my sophomore year. Uh, I had been registered with the Woburn, Massachusetts Draft Board, and my number was 5. And as I looked out July day in 1963, my draft number was coming up in a week. And I looked, wait a minute, do I want to get drafted or do I want to enlist? So I decided to enlist, went to the Air Force recruiter. I took the Air Force qualifying exams, and I aced them except for one. I was 5 points short. So I had my choice of selections, assignments, and I decided to go into Air Force intelligence. The problem with intelligence in the military, is there any? So I had the choice of not intelligence. They gave me a choice of missile airframe repair, which was I was going to learn how to repair the airframe on Atlas missiles, heavy equipment operator to learn how to do heavy equipment, or I could be a weapons mechanic. And what kind of a what kind of a mechanic works on weapons? So I went with the flow, and I decided to go delayed enlistment until February of 1964. Why? Because it was warm in San Antonio and it was cold up here. So I got on the Super Constellation plane to fly down on my first flight to San Antonio. I finished my basic training, and I was sent to school, Denver, Colorado. And my school was to learn everything about every nuclear weapon in the U.S. Air Force inventory, which was quite an education. And so now, Sam, would you like to introduce yourself?
Uh, my name's Sam Steller. I'm from, well, not originally from Wakefield, actually, originally from the Fenway in Boston. I moved here when I was 6. I'm 80 now. So I wasn't born and bred here, but I did grow up here, and it's been enjoyable. Beautiful little town, idyllic in the sense when you're looking from the outside in. It's different, though, if you end up being part of the town, politics. I'll work for the town, which I did, and I was a police officer after I got out of the service. I was in the service from July 67 to July 70. And after I got out, I was on the police force for 10 years, local police force, and had a major stroke and was forced to retire from there at age 37. And got into real estate. Many of you probably know me from either real estate or from being on the Wakefield Board of Health. I was in real estate. I worked for Chris Barrett for 7.5 years, 1983 to 1990. And I opened my own real estate business in 1991, Sam Steller Realtors. And I was also on the Board of Health, elected official from 1987 to about 2010. I think that wraps it up for my background.
So I decided to enlist in '63, but delayed till 1964. And there was a Jesuit priest at Boston College who was a friend, told me that when I came out of the service, he would find me a job. Now, I had been a nuclear chemistry and geology major at BC. And so he did. When I got out in 1968, within 2 months, he had found me a job with a geotechnical engineering company. And my first job was working on the Seabrook nuclear plant. But back up again, so I went from basic school in Denver, Colorado, to Cannon Air Force Base in New Mexico. It was the 27th Fighter Wing. And from then, most of the squadron had left and was in Da Nang, Vietnam, on a temporary duty. So my job for the first 2 months that I was on base was a pickup truck, a pitchfork, and taking the tumbleweeds away from the aircraft hangar doors. So I was on tumbleweed patrol. So the guys came back from Da Nang and with great war stories, and this was just about the Bay of Tonkin, so we hadn't really been involved much before. But these guys had been doing CIA jobs into Cambodia and Laos, and they had incredible tales to tell, working with the Laotian Air Force. So anyway, they're back 2 months, and all of a sudden, hey, would you like to go on a temporary duty to Japan, Misawa, Japan? Sure, I'll go. Anyway, to get out off this New Mexico base, because all you could smell in the afternoon in the hot weather was the cattle yards blowing west. And so we proceeded to go to Japan. We had these big C-130 aircraft. We loaded on, and we went from New Mexico to Travis Air Force Base in San Francisco, from there to Honolulu, Hawaii, Hickam, then to Wake Island, then to Guam, then to Okinawa, and then down to the Philippines. It was a very uncomfortable ride for 4 days. And our beds were big cases of AR-15 rifles that were stored in the center bay. But we got there and settled in. So I'll throw it back to Sam.
I received a draft notice in the middle of my sophomore year at Bentley College. Bentley College was located in Boston at the time on Boylston Street, right across from the Prudential. So I went down and talked to Mrs. Lazaro at the draft board. The draft board was located in the basement side door on the right-hand side, in the basement of the Wakefield post office. And I explained to her I was going to school, and could she put off me being drafted until the end of the school year. And she told me I'd have to go before the actual draft board and ask them for an extension. And they gave it to me, and she asked me, find out the last day of your school year. So I went back to Bentley, found out the last day, and I called her up and told her. And on the last day, I received that draft notice to be, I was supposed to report to the Boston Army base on July 31st, 1967 at 8 a.m. in the morning, which I did. But before I did, I went to see if I could get in the Navy. I was a former Sea Scout, just for a short time. They didn't have any openings. Of course, I tried the National Guard and the Army Reserve. They didn't have any openings because everybody else was trying to avoid going to Vietnam, which was almost at the peak. I was in during that time, 67 to 70, 68 and 69 were the peak years, where over 38,000 soldiers died at that time. Soldiers, Marines, Air Force personnel. It was a tough time, but anyway, I went down and I talked to the Army recruiter near the corner of Boylston Street and Tremont Street. He was originally from Reading. He said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I don't care." He says, "I can make you a clerk." I said, "Okay, I'll do that." And he said, "Well, you have to take the extra year, so you're going to be in for 3 years." I said, "That's fine." And so I went to basic training, and basic training to me was a snap because I had been working in construction, farm work, putting in foundations, and that was real tough work. So basic training seemed like a snap. Went through basic, then I was at Fort Dix, New Jersey, went to clerk school, and after clerk school, they pulled me aside and the sergeant said, "You're going to finance school." I said, "Sure, why not?" And went to finance school at Fort Benjamin Harrison in Indianapolis, Indiana. And got there just before Thanksgiving of 1967. And I could continue, but you probably would like to take it from here. Go ahead.
Alrighty. So we came back from Japan to New Mexico, and it was kind of like itching to get out of there again. So I said, okay, the next temporary duty assignment was going to Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. Volunteered for that. So here we go, traipses across the Pacific again on the C-130s. We get into the Philippines, and we were going to be there now for 3 months or so. So a couple of weeks into the stay, came back with an announcement, who would like to come back to the Philippines permanent and leave New Mexico? Well, just everybody just volunteered, and so the whole squadron just moved almost en masse from New Mexico to the Philippines. And what a beautiful place that was. We would take Friday at noontime. I would get my crew. I had a weapons crew of four men. I would get the crew together and at around noon and say, if anybody looks for me, I'm on sick call, which was one of the largest military hospitals in the world, and the chances of anyone finding you was called slim and none. So we had a bus line called the Rabbit, which left from Angeles City, which was the city right off the base. And we get on the little Rabbit bus. I think it cost 50 cents to go to Manila. And in Manila, we had an apartment. It cost us $75 a month for 5 of us. And that was where we holed up on the corner of Taft and Rojas Boulevards. We met a couple of gentlemen. One turned out that his father was a Philippine senator, and another one whose father had been the past president of the Philippines. They introduced us into a whole upper level of Manila society, which was almost pure Spanish, and they took us out to their homes in a place called Makati, which is still the wealthiest section of Manila, and incredible times. One of the guys, Ron Van Vagel, was going out with a young lady who was the daughter of the Philippine ambassador to the Philippines, the Pakistani ambassador to the Philippines. And so we were riding pretty high. On Monday mornings, we would all chip in and we would get a taxi for the 40 miles from Manila back to Clark Air Force Base. Cost us $12. So So then we had temporary duty assignments where we would go up to Tainan, Taiwan, and we'd go up there for 6 weeks at a time. And we worked 48 hours on and 48 hours off. And it was just an unbelievable time. Job was to maintain 4 F-100F aircraft, 2-seaters, loaded 1.1 megaton nuclear weapons, even though there weren't any nuclear weapons in Taiwan all those years, because we did not work for the Air Force. We worked for a little 3-letter organization called CIA, and they called all the shots. And we would have 4 or 5 alerts a month, and you'd be sleeping in your bed 2 o'clock in the morning, and the klaxon goes off, and you're getting up and you're getting dressed as fast as you can, and you're making sure that you have your pants legs inside your boots and laced up, because when you went outside, in the grass were little 10-stepper snakes called crates. And if you had fallen down and one of the little crates just touched the fang to your skin, you were dead. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You're dead. So then we would go from there, and there's the flight line. And the planes are all lit up, and the crew chief was already inside with the engines up and running. And I'd be with the pilot, and we would go on one knee right beside a big red painted line called the no-loan zone. And behind us was a military police on his knee with a rifle trained at our back. If anyone crossed that red line, I said, well, no loan zone, and he had the right to shoot you. So we were inside, got the engines all running up. I'd go in, check the weapon. The pilot would go up, naturally get in the pilot seat, and he'd be getting ready to go. And I would hear a buzzer, and I'd look up, and I would flip him a thumbs up, and he's supposed to give me a thumbs up if he's going to go. So he turned his thumb sideways and bounced it off the side of the plane. In other words, stand down. We have to reconfirm the codes. So over on the wall was a 90-second clock, which would start up. And he's going through the codes back and forth. At the end of the 90 seconds, you hear, turn, give him a thumbs up. He'd go, no, he'd turn his thumb sideways and go, stand down, reconfirm. So we'd go through this 4 or 5 times, and it would shut down. The drill was over. Now, this was after planes had taken off from Chinese planes had taken off from Quemoy and Matsu Islands, heading towards Taiwan. So that's why we went on alert. So one night, we're going through the whole drill, and we figure we're going through 2 or 3 iterations and figure, well, this is it. And I look, and my pilot's leaning over the side of the plane, and it looks like there's liquid. He's literally throwing up down the side of the plane. He was a major. Then the next plane in line was a captain, then a lieutenant colonel, and then another captain. And the major and the lieutenant colonel is throwing up on the side of the plane, and it's called dead men walking because they got a go code. Oh, God, here we go. We're going to war. And they just couldn't take it. All of a sudden, lights came on from everywhere. A brigadier general came walking out of the shadows with 2 bird colonels, and everything shut down. So what we found out, it was a psychological drill to see what would happen if these pilots got a code to go. And guess what? They flunked. So we go inside. That's why part of my hair turned white. That's why I now have 100% post-traumatic stress awarded to me because of it. And we went inside, and the major that commanded the pad was a little bit of a sadist. And the youngest kid on my crew was 18. I was 23. I had 2 19-year-olds and an 18-year-old on the crew. And the 18-year-old said, sir, what are we supposed to do if we launch the planes? He goes, son, bend over and kiss your A goodbye because we got 6 megaton coming down on us, and we're going to be dust. And to this day, every night before I go to bed, I remember those words. So, and there weren't supposed to be any nuclear weapons in Taiwan at all. And so that pointed up the first big lie. So I will leave that part of my story there. and defer back to Sam.
Okay. I went to finance school. It was fun. I enjoyed it. The barracks were cold. They were pre-World War II barracks. The heat, it was during the winter months. There was very little heat. It was cold. Indianapolis is flat. And when the wind blows out there in the wintertime, it is very, very cold. We'd, Friday, on the weekends, we'd walk from our barracks out the post. It was about 4 mile walk. We'd walk to a lounge outside Fort Benjamin Harrison, and it was modern inside at the time, 1967, and if anybody remembers it, a place like Lum's, which was a restaurant. There was one located here on Route 1 years ago, but there were a number of them down south. And so we'd go out there and they'd sing northern songs. They'd have a band, then sing northern songs, then they'd sing southern songs, and people from the north would, like Massachusetts, the song, and My Old Kentucky Home, those types of songs. And they'd play songs from the north and the south to appease people from the north and to appease people from the south. So you could see people getting a little hot under the collar. And at the end of the night, they'd always play the national anthem, and everybody would stand up and salute and hug each other. So everything would turn out great. Then we'd have to walk back to the barracks. And I remember one particular night that was so cold. It had to be well below zero. And if any one of us faltered or fell down, that would have been the end of us. But we fortunately made it back to the barracks. I graduated from finance school in February of 1968. Tet offenses was going on hot and heavy in Vietnam. And there were 400 of us that graduated from finance school. Almost half went to Korea. Almost half went to Vietnam. And 13 of us went to Hawaii. So I lucked out again. Out of 400 of us, 13 of us went to Hawaii. It was an absolutely beautiful tour. It's heaven on earth. People go to Florida and they tell how it's so great and so on and so forth. It's nothing compared to Hawaii. It's not humid in Hawaii. You have the winds blowing all the time. Not bad, maybe 10, 15 miles an hour. Some days it's worse. But it's just so beautiful and luscious. There's desert there. There's a mountain with snow on top of it. There's the rainforest in Maui. It rains. It's the biggest rainforest in the United States, and I just couldn't tell you how amazing the place was, how picturesque. So anyway, what happened was I ended up there at the beginning of March 1968. You can go from there.
Alrighty. So my squadron, the 523rd Tactical Fighter Squadron, comprised of 4 squadrons of 12 F-100s, almost 50 planes, which comprised the 4th, 5th Fighter Wing at Clark Air Force Base. And our boss was a legendary man, a bird colonel at the time, with the name Charles E. Yeager, Chuck Yeager, first man to ever break the sound barrier. So one of my proud possessions is a Mark Buster certificate for breaking the sound barrier signed by Colonel Charles E. Yeager, which I proudly have mounted on my wall. We saw him, up and down the flight line at the time. He was a maverick. He would fly from the Philippines over to Da Nang, Vietnam, spend about 2 or 3 days. He would go out doing bomb rocket strafes, drop a few napalm, and turn around and come back to Clark. And he had given his own plane was a B-57 bomber, Canberra, a British-Australian type of plane, and that was his pride and joy. So our squadron had the best of all worlds. They would fly over to Da Nang for 2 weeks, and they would do bomb rocket strafe, 20-millimeter cannon, 750-pound bombs, napalm. So that was a tough job. Then they would come back to the Philippines for a week. Then they would go up to Taiwan with a hot nuclear hotbed, and they would do 48 hours on and 48 hours off. And the off time was interesting because we could go anywhere in Taiwan that we wanted to go. A lot of us took day trips up to Taipei. You get up there, and all of the little shops, the mama sands that run the little shops, guys would come in Vietnam with $5,000, $10,000. They would rent the little stall, and you go in there for a drink. Everything was free, and it was just party time. So we would do this every 6 weeks. 6 weeks in Taiwan, 6 weeks back in the Philippines. Most of the time in the Philippines, we did what they call BDU-1 bomb loads, and that means Bomb Dummy Unit 1. We weren't loading actual nuclear weapons every day. It was just the dummy units. And they used to know when the satellites were going to pass overhead, and they would fill up the flight line with about 50 dummy units, BDU-1s, just as the Soviet satellites were coming over. So I figured that put a little craw in there, thinking like, God, these people, look at that, 50 nuclear weapons out on the flight line. So it was playing games all the time. So I did my time there, and my time was up towards the end of, let's see, when was it? 67. The fall of 67, and I had 2 months, no, not 2 months, 3 months left to go. So I got a new assignment from the Philippines. Someone in a jet assigned me to Minot, North Dakota for a winter. So we're outside 50 below zero. I'm working on F-106 fighter interceptors. And somebody had a crazy thought. The craziest time up there, we go on what they call war drill. And we would have our F-106 interceptors melded in with F-101 interceptors from the Canadian Air Force. So here we are, 25 planes in the line, loaded live weapons, engines running, in a war drill, what it would be like if we were to go to war. And in the meantime, the planes are fine, the pilots are fine, and we've got icicles hanging off our nose. So I left there and got out, and like I said, in March of 1968. I went to see my professor at Boston College, and he had me a job with a geotechnical engineering company within 2 weeks, called Weston, WSTON. So I went out and I was working seismic surveys on most of the nuclear power plants on the east coast of the United States, and also out on the west coast. Then I was assigned to Seabrook Nuclear Plant to do a survey. While doing the survey, something accidentally happened, and I had a line. I was setting off half a stick of dynamite to generate a signal for the seismic, and the line blew up in the air. With a wet line, came down on a 33,000 volt line, came down, touched the second 33,000 volt line. So I got 33,000 volts through me, picked me up off a chair inside of a truck, threw me head first against a metal wall, gave me a traumatic brain injury. And because of that traumatic brain injury, which never looked at, never went to a hospital, because if I had gone to a hospital, then OSHA would have closed a company down, and two nice guys would have lost their business. So I developed bipolar manic depression because of it, and I suffered for the rest of my life, up to today, on it. So that's kind of a recap of up till I got out of the service.
Okay. As I said, I arrived in Hawaii. Actually, Schofield Barracks, which is at the base of the mountains in Hawaii on the island of Oahu. And my first night, when I woke up in the morning, before I went in, went to sleep at night in the barracks, I went into the latrine. Gee, regular folks, that's the bathroom. And it was set up, so there were multiple stalls and urinals and 6 or 7 sinks. And I was brushing my teeth at a sink. And there was a guy next to me who was doing the same thing. And all of a sudden, this bat flew out of nowhere, scared me half to death. And I said to the guy next to me, I said, "How come there's bats in here?" And he said, "Oh, that isn't a bat. That's a moth." That's how big they are in Hawaii. Now, I was so surprised. Are you kidding me? "Oh, no, that's a moth. They grow kind of big around here." So I went to sleep that night, woke up the next morning. I was assigned a bunk and a locker. I had put my things in a locker. I woke up the next morning, got out of my bunk, took a shower, avoid the moths, opened my locker, and my locker was gray on the inside and outside of it, a metal locker, probably, about 6.5 feet high, just like a high school locker that had in school. I opened it up, and on the inside door of the locker, it was all brownish red. And I looked closer, and all of a sudden I realized they were cockroaches. So I kicked the locker door, and all these cockroaches were on the inside of the locker, just fell to the floor and scattered all over the place. And that was the end of that. I went to put on my shoes. I had my socks on. I was dressed. I went to put on my shoes. The inside of my shoes were all green mold. Yeah. That's why people wear sandals in the tropics. I'd have to clean out my shoes every morning. So anyway, we didn't have to worry about poisonous snakes or poisonous plants. in Hawaii because when you go in, when you land at the airport, if you have any, they check everything very thoroughly for any type of animals that you may bring in, like a snake or something like that. So the islands don't have any poisonous things, plants, or in the ocean. You don't see any. You're at the beaches. There's no coral. It's in the outer shelves that you may see the coral. So the beaches are beautiful. Actually, what people die from there, tourists, they die from drowning. And so, when I went swimming, I saw a stingray one time while I was swimming along, sharks, anything that swims in the ocean you see. My compatriot here had mentioned crates. When I went on to Okinawa, I saw those. I swam with them. Actually, in the East China Sea, and that was an eye opener. But I'll discuss that after I get finished with beautiful Hawaii. So the second day I was at Hawaii, it started raining in deluges. Deluges. I couldn't believe how much it rained. It rained for 30 days. I thought somebody was building an ark someplace. It rained so much. It rained for 30 days straight. I had hit the monsoon season. Monsoons can happen anytime in Hawaii from December to the end of March. And at the end of the March, the sun came out. During the daytime, it was 82 degrees. At nighttime, it was 78. Absolutely beautiful. I had a great tour of duty until they asked for a volunteer, and I volunteered. And what actually happened, I went to this place called Triplet General Hospital, and I didn't know it at the time. I was there in a small office for a week, and I was told that I was going to give partial pays to inpatients who were soldiers at the hospital. And soldiers at that hospital, Triplet General Hospital, were soldiers that were medevaced out of Vietnam, stabilized before they took the trip to Hawaii. And in Hawaii, they were there to have their wounds healed and their minds healed too. They were amputees. They were just young guys. I was 24 at the time. And I was seeing kids that didn't have any arms or legs. They had portions of muscles missing from their backs, their shoulders, their buttocks. None of them were whole. There were parts of them, and they had badly broken bodies and badly broken minds. As I said, my tour of duty, nothing could be more picturesque. is what I saw in Hawaii. That was a great part of that tour of duty. The not so great part of it is witnessing what I saw. When I first arrived at the small office I was going to work in, I had to take an oath. And I couldn't understand what it was all about. I took an oath saying that repeating that I wasn't going to tell anybody what I saw, heard, or observed at this hospital. A week later, I went to pay this GI. He was no more than 17, 18 years old. And I asked him how much he wanted. He said $50. I counted out the $50. Everybody was paid in cash at that time. And I filled out the pay voucher and said, here, sign on the bottom. And he started screaming at me and yelling and swearing. And I just couldn't. I said, just sign on the bottom so we can get this over with. Take your money and get out of here. And finally, he broke down and he started crying. He had his hands behind his back. And he showed me his arms. He didn't have any hands. That's how I found out that I was paying soldiers without limbs and without parts of their bodies at Tripler General Hospital. It just set me back. I was so shocked. My tour duty lasted 7 months, and then I was shipped to Okinawa to await orders for Vietnam.
I look back as to why I flunked out of Boston College, and it was because of something that occurred in Wakefield. And I happened to be the sax player for a rock and roll band from Wakefield called the Belvederes. And so we played for 5 years down the Cape. We were in a house band in a place called the Webster House, and we played all over Wakefield. And
What'd you play?
tenor, alto, and baritone sax.
I play alto.
Play alto?
Yeah.
And I took my alto with me to Japan, and we would play for a local city to Misawa, and all the Japanese are sitting in the audience like this, and we go through, we play a number, and they go, and you get set to play another number, and then they go.
That's how they have.
It was crazy,
Yeah.
but I had so much fun in the Belvederes, and good times. And my sometime if we do this some more,
You keep going.
my father's family's from Wakefield, and my oldest great-grandfather settled here in 1863 out of Ireland, and he was a gravedigger for St. Patrick's Church in Stoneham, and he's buried in St. Patrick's Cemetery. And 20 years later, he sent for his son Bartholomew. So Bartholomew came to Wakefield and married. He had a livery business hauling fruit and produce from the market Scully Square out to Wakefield in a wagon. And his claim to fame in 1912, he had the first truck livery in Wakefield, hauling
Motor vehicle.
first
truck.
motor vehicle truck. So he had 3 sons and 3 daughters, and I've got great stories from my father for Wakefield. After he graduated in 1933, he was the manager for the First National Store on Main Street, and it's where my aunt introduced my mother to him in 1938.
Did he know Lloyd Curtis?
I have no idea. He passed away.
He was the manager of First National Stores in 1960.
Oh, my father was there like in the 30s.
Okay.
Great story.
And the First National Store was on Main Street in Wakefield in the square,
Yeah.
right across from, not right across, but diagonally across from the Colonial Spa,
Yes.
where Brothers Restaurant is today.
Yeah.
And the A&P was also located in Wakefield. And that was across the street from the old Wakefield Trust Company.
Yeah. Now, my aunt was pressing my mother on my father because she needed to get married. Why did she need to get married? Here she was, 28 years old and not married, which was kind of like unheard of in the 1930s. So, my mother's family was an old Stoneham family that dated from the 1700s. So it was an old Irish family married an old English family. And so, Irish and English, they fought each other for centuries. So on that, I guess we finish off for this segment.